Early next morning, Felicitas used a free moment to slip upstairs to Aunt Cordula and tell her that Heinrich's errand to the poor carpenter's family had succeeded. On the second-floor landing, she met Heinrich, who was beaming and pointing his thumb toward the door he had garlanded the day before. The flowers were gone. Wilted loops of greenery lay in confusion on the floor, and various vases stood against the wall. "Whew, down it came fast," he whispered. 1, 2, 3, the little forget-me-not was on the ground. I came just as he was still on the ladder. Who? Why, the professor? He looked frightful, but I'd nailed that wreath for eternity. He had to tug and tear like mad. But imagine, Fiechin, he shook my hand when I wished him good morning. That did surprise me. Felicitas's lips curled. She was about to make a sharp remark, but suddenly slipped away into the dark corridor. Footsteps were approaching inside the room. Later, when she came down from the attic, the voice of the counselor's widow drifted up from the first floor, soft and plaintive, so melodious it was almost a song. "The poor flowers," she lamented. "How could you do that to me, Adele?" came a man's voice. "You know I loathe such glorifications." It was the same cold voice that had once made so dreadful an impression on the little Fee, only now deeper, with a note of suppressed reproach. Felicitas leaned over the railing and looked down, scarcely breathing. There he was, carefully helping little Anna down the stairs, leading her step by step. Nothing in this figure matched her idea of a professor. To Felicitas, such men had an air of refinement and quiet dignity. Here she saw none of that. A sturdy, seemingly iron-bound frame moved angularly and with firm, almost harsh precision. There was something unbending in it, as though that neck had never bowed, not even in greeting. And the head confirmed it. He lifted his face a moment, plain, unsympathetic, the same face she had once struggled in vain to reconcile with the gentle Evangelist John. It had not grown kinder. A thick, reddish-blonde beard covered chin and cheeks nearly to the chest, and between the shaggy brows, drawn even darker now by vexation at the floral decorations, lay a deep furrow. Yet for all its lack of grace, the whole figure bore the stamp of mastery, of strength and of will. Now he bent down to the child, who was struggling on the steps, and lifted her into his arms. "Come here, my dear. Those poor little legs won't manage it, will they?" he said. His tone was unexpectedly gentle. But it is not a player's child he speaks to, thought Felicitas bitterly. The morning hours grew noisy in the quiet house. The front door bell seemed never to stop ringing. Even in this small town, there were enough people eager to bask in the reflected glory of a famous man, never realizing how sharply his light would throw their own small selves into relief. For Felicitas, however, these visits were welcome. Much as she longed for a decision, she dreaded the first encounter, knowing herself still far from calm. Every hour gained was precious, but the rulers of the household seemed intent on hastening the scene. Scarcely had dinner been cleared away when Heinrich came into the kitchen. He eyed her dress, brushed a little flour from her dark sleeve, and said with an uncertain glance, "Your braid's loose a bit there by your ear, Fiechin. Fix it up. He mustn't see anything like that. You're to go over to the late master's room. They're all there. Come now, don't look so scared. White as chalk you are. Courage, Fiechin. He can't bite your head off." Felicitas opened the door and stepped inside. Her ivory-pale face looked almost ghostly in its stillness. Just as 9 years before, on that stormy morning, Mrs. Hellwig sat in her armchair by the window. Beside her, back to the door, hands clasped behind him, stood the man who had driven this girl onto the path of servitude, who had never allowed that path a moment's deviation, who had punished her from afar without ever asking, "Are you guilty?" With reason, Felicitas had dreaded this first meeting. Now, seeing him, she felt anger and resentment surge within her, yet self-control was never more needed. "There is Caroline," said Mrs. Hellwig. The professor turned, looking genuinely astonished. He had likely never imagined that the player's child, who had once stamped her foot in fury on this very spot, could have grown into this tall, composed young woman. He stepped toward her, making a slight motion with his right arm, as though about to offer his hand, as he had to Heinrich. The thought tightened her heart. Her fingers curled into her palms. Her arms remained rigid at her sides. But her lashes lifted, and a look of deadly coldness met his. Thus one bitter foe measures another. He seemed to feel it. Instinctively, he drew back and studied her from head to foot. At that moment came a knock, and the counselor's widow's fair, smiling face appeared in the doorway. "May I?" she asked sweetly, and before anyone could reply, she was already inside. "Ah, I've come just in time for the Inquisition," she said brightly. "My dear Caroline, you'll now see there are wills besides your own. Poor Wellner shall at last have his answer." "I beg you, Adele, let Johannes speak," said Mrs. Hellwig sharply. "Let us stay with this point," said the professor. He crossed his arms and leaned against the table. "Will you tell me why you reject the man's honorable proposal?" His calm, passionless eyes rested on her. "Because I despise him. He is a hypocrite who uses piety as a cloak for greed and avarice," she said firmly. "Heavens! What slander!" cried the counselor's widow, raising her hands in horror, her blue eyes turned heavenward. Mrs. Hellwig gave a short, harsh laugh. "There you have it, Johannes. That tongue is always ready with scorn. I know it well. Make it short. You'll get nowhere with her, and I'll not have respectable people reviled in my house." The professor did not reply at once. Stroking his beard slowly, his hand was strangely fine and narrow. He let his eyes rest a moment on the pretty widow, who still stood like a praying seraph. Perhaps he heard only her words. His lips curved faintly. Who could read that face? "You've made some impressive character studies in your few weeks here, Adele," he said at last, "to plead a case so earnestly. For heaven's sake, Johannes," she cried, blushing scarlet, "you don't imagine that She broke off, embarrassed. Now unmistakable irony flashed in his eyes. "All the ladies who visit my mother agree that Wellner is a man of honor," she said quickly, striving to recover herself. "The mission funds pass through his hands, and no one finds fault." "And on that you would swear, of course," he interrupted curtly. "I do not know the man," he turned to Felicitas, "and therefore cannot judge whether your accusation is justified." "Johannes!" cried Mrs. Hellwig irritably. "Please, mother, we will discuss that later," he said evenly. Then to Felicitas, "No one shall compel you. Until now, I have never granted you the right to decide in any matter. First, because you were under guidance I fully trusted, and next, because your nature inclines to dangerous excesses and rebellion against what is meant for your own good. In this, however, my authority ends. I even concede that you may be right. You are young. He is, I hear, in advanced years. That will not do. Another obstacle is the difference of station. For the moment, he may overlook your origin. Later, there is always reaction. Disturbed balance avenges itself." How sensible that sounded, and how utterly without heart. He was the very embodiment of those written decrees that had governed her life with such relentless coldness. He stepped closer. "You have caused us trouble," he said, lifting a finger. "You have neither understood nor, I believe, wished to win my mother's affection. As things stand, you yourself cannot wish to remain in this house." "I would leave this very hour if I could." "I can well believe it. You have shown plainly enough that our strict and conscientious care is hateful to you." His tone sharpened. "Our labor has been wasted. To cage a migratory bird is futile. Well, you shall have what you wish, yet my duty is not done. I will first attempt to trace your relatives." "You once thought otherwise," said Mrs. Hellwig mockingly. "My view has changed, mother," he returned coolly. Felicitas was silent. She knew the effort would fail. Aunt Cordula had tried long ago, without result. "I shall take the necessary steps today," he continued, "and I think 2 months will suffice for any inquiry. Until then, you remain under my guardianship and in my mother's employ. If, as I fear, no family appears, then I ask for my freedom the moment the time expires," she broke in quickly. "This is monstrous," cried the widow indignantly. "You speak as though you had been tortured and crucified in this house of peace and Christian charity. Ingratitude." "You believe, then, that you can dispense with our further aid?" asked the professor, ignoring her. "I must decline it." "Very well," he said briefly after a pause. "In 2 months you shall be free to do as you please." He turned to the window. "You may go," commanded Mrs. Hellwig harshly. Felicitas left the room. "So, 8 more weeks of struggle," she whispered as she crossed the hall. "A struggle to the death."